BookTube, it's Kim at Middle of the Book March. Today I wanted to introduce yet another reading project for 2021. Over the weekend I put my video up on Cromwell 2021, in which for the entire year I'm going to read the biography of Thomas Cromwell as well as the Hilary Mantel Cromwell trilogy throughout the year, so 4 books for the entire year. Very doable, 1 book per quarter. Today's video is introducing my second book project that will run for the entire year, and it is George Eliot 2021. If 2020 taught me anything, it was how much I love George Eliot and her novels. Yes, she is a she. She was born Marian Evans and took the pen name George Eliot because as a Victorian woman in England in the 1800s, she was afraid that she would not get published under a female name, so she became George Eliot. Marian Evans was born November 22nd in 1819 in Warwickshire, England, and she died on December 22nd in 1880 in London, so she died at 61 years old. And I gave a little bit of background for her in my Victober video last October. So let me just tell you what my plan is this year. Every single month, ending in November, I'm going to be reading a George Eliot book, whether it's a nonfiction about her or it's reading through the rest of her novels. Because in 2020, I read both Middlemarch, which is why I changed my channel name, and Daniel Deronda. And I read both of these with Alba from Seriella. We did the George Eliot buddy reads last year. And not only do I love George Eliot, but I love doing the buddy reads with Alba. We had a blast. And the two of us were initially talking about, we got to read the rest of her novels next year. So that's why this project came about. As well as, Alba bought a book that was fascinating to me, and I had ordered it probably a month ago. And it just came in last week, and this is the Jewish Odyssey of George Eliot. And this is a very slim book, but it's discussing her attitudes and her relationships with Judaism. And that's the novel Daniel Deronda is probably not just her novel with the deepest information and the deepest thoughts about fictional characters and Judaism, but it kind of details her development arc from thinking about religious people in Christianity versus Jewish people in England in the 1800s. And so this is going to be the first book that I read, and I'll be reading this in January. Now I say I, but there are a few people who are interested in this reading project. Let me back up a little bit, and I'll tell you the schedule. I will write out the schedule in the description box below, but anybody who would like to take part, you can either take part in a Voxer group, or you can follow along in my videos. You can read all of the books all year, every month, or you can just read her novels, or you could just read 1 book if you want to do that. If you're interested, let me know in the comments below. If you are on Voxer, please message me and I can add you to that group if you're interested in doing that. So, I am a geek and I put it all in a spreadsheet. So I have this little clip of my Google Sheets that I entered, and what I basically wrote out was the title of the books, the author, because some of them are nonfiction about George Eliot, the date they were published, the page count, and the month that I'm reading them. So, this first book is the Jewish Odyssey of George Eliot, written by Gertrude Himmelfarb. And this book was published in 2009, and my copy has 154 pages. So I thought this is a great, light way to get introduced into this program. And it also discusses a lot of the themes that were in Daniel Deronda, which is the last George Eliot book that I read. So that information is still fresh. Alba's already read this book and loved it. So she said it's fascinating and it opens up a lot of information on George Eliot. The second book I don't have yet, and I'm still waiting for it to be delivered to me, is Scenes of Clerical Life, which is considered George Eliot's first novel, but it's actually a series of 3 novellas or stories that were kind of strung together. It was a serialized set of stories that was made in kind of her loose first novel. It was published in 1857, and the particular copy that I ordered, I think, has around 416 pages. It was published anonymously in Blackwood's Edinburgh magazine in 1857, and it is 3 stories that make up the Scenes of Clerical Life: The Sad Fortunes of the Reverend Amos Barton, Mr. Gilfil's Love Story, and Janet's Repentance. And so those were put together in one volume, and that's the first book of George Eliot's that I'm going to read. The third book for March, so the Jewish Odyssey is January, Scenes of Clerical Life is February. The third book for March is George Eliot, Voice of a Century, and this is a biography written by Frederick R. Carl. This is a chunker. So February, no, this is March. March is March of the Mammoths. So this particular book, without notes and index and appendix, is 644 pages. And I do plan on taking part in March of the Mammoths, but not with this particular book, with another one. So those might be the only 2 books that I read that month. But this is a biography, and it says, Frederick R. Carl's magisterial biography of George Eliot proves her to be one of the most fascinating and iconic individuals of her time. So that is for March. And this is a big book, so I don't expect that I'm going to be lacking for any information on George Eliot. Some of the books are more specific. This one is a general biography of her, so I think that'll be really interesting. Now, in April, I'm going to be reading Adam Bede, and this will be a little bit of a break. It's a lot shorter, even though this particular Penguin classic is over 500 pages. Let's see. A bestseller. It's the story of a beautiful country girl's seduction by the local squire and its bitter, tragic end. A bestseller from the moment of publication. It's rich in a loving recreation of a small community shaken to its core. It's more than a charming, faultlessly evoked pastoral. However much the reader may sympathize with Hetty Sorrel and identify with Arthur Donnet-Horn, her seducer, and with Adam Bede, the man Hetty betrays, it is George Eliot's creation of the distant aesthetic whole, the complex, multifarious life of Hayslope, which so grips the reader's imagination. George Eliot famously wrote about English pastoral life, the English countryside, the aristocracy contrasted with people in poverty. So I'm not even going to say that one looks good, because they all look good. That's why I developed this project. So next for May is George Eliot, The Last Victorian by Catherine Hughes. This one is another biography, and why am I reading more than one? Because I love George Eliot, and this is a much shorter one, but I love getting different perspectives. And if the 2 biographies are that similar, it'll be fairly easy to kind of skim read and see what different perspectives and different information I can get from each book. What's next? That was May. The next one for June is one of her most famous, The Mill on the Floss. And that was published in 1860, and the edition that I looked up has 580 pages. George Eliot was a lengthy writer, and I've said this in previous videos. As much as I love her and her novels, she can get long-winded, she gets very descriptive, she uses a lot of language, but that's part of her brilliance. But some of her books are very long. And The Mill on the Floss. Brought up at Dorcote Mill, Maggie Tulliver worships her brother Tom and is desperate to win the approval of her parents, but her passionate, wayward nature and her fierce intelligence bring her into constant conflict with her family. As she reaches adulthood, the clash between their expectations and her desires is painfully played out, as she finds herself torn between her relationships with 3 very different men: her proud and stubborn brother, a close friend who is also the son of her family's worst enemy, and a charismatic but dangerous suitor. Dun dun dun. Again, sounds fascinating, and I am sure, having read so much backstory already on George Eliot, there's quite a bit of autobiographical information in there. Okay, July. George Eliot in Love by Brenda Maddox. This is again a nice little one. It'll be a nice refreshment after The Mill and the Floss. This one has pictures in the middle. Let's see if I can't. There she is. There's one of the most attractive pictures of George Eliot, which I used for my thumbnail. But she was written as not a very attractive woman, and she was actually called ugly by some other writers and historians. So interesting fun fact. George Eliot in Love. Let's see. She had a nonconformist and captivating personal life, a compelling story in itself. Ridiculed as an ugly duckling, Eliot forged her own path, making a living as a writer when most women could not work outside the home. She courted controversy, living with a married man for most of her adult life in violation of the strict social codes of her time. Soon after he died, she married a much younger man who attempted suicide on their honeymoon. So, yeah, I mean, she lived with a married man without his divorce, without the 2 of them getting married for decades, and married a man 20 years her junior who, on their honeymoon, tried to kill himself. So this completely fascinating. What is next? The next one for August is Silas Marner by George Eliot. And this one was published in 1861, and it has 220 pages. My version is the Barnes & Noble edition. It also includes 2 short stories. So, again, Silas Marner is probably another one of her more well-known novels. The story opens as Silas Marner, falsely accused of theft, loses everything, including his faith in God. Embittered and alienated from his fellow man, he moves to the village of Ramallah, where he becomes a weaver. Taking refuge in his work, Silas slowly begins to accumulate gold, his only joy in life, until one day that too is stolen from him. Then one dark evening, a beautiful golden-haired child, lost in seeing the light from Silas's cottage, toddles in through his doorway. As Silas grows to love the girl as if she were his own daughter, his life changes into something precious. But his happiness is threatened when the child's real father comes to claim her as his own, and Silas must face losing a treasure greater than all the gold in the world. This one I read many, many, many years ago, and don't remember enough of it that I can't wait to reread it. So, yay. The next one is, again, it's one of her novels. It's Ramallah. And this particular one was published in 1863. This has 656 pages in the Penguin Classic. No, it doesn't, because my copy has 583 pages. Another short one. Ramallah. And she says about her own book, "There is no book of mine about which I more thoroughly feel that I swear by every sentence as having been written with my own best blood." Let's see. Ramallah, the novel which argues her most profound and utopian vision of the position of women. Ramallah's patient subservience to her scholar father Bardo, her unhappy marriage to supple and treacherous Tito, and her passionate intellectual and spiritual awakening take place in Renaissance Florence, which, like Victorian Britain, was caught up in a period of ferment and transition. Yes, 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 yes. And then the second to last one, this is October's read. This is a Felix Holt the Radical by George Eliot, published in 1866. This particular copy has, and it's also got all of these, most of these books. This one has copious notes in the back. Even her novels This one with the appendix has 464 pages. And this one is for October. Felix Holt the Radical. Just as the 1832 Reform Act is about to change the bucolic and conservatively ordered way of life forever in Trebi Magna, two native sons return home. Harold Transome, heir to Transome Court, comes to claim his inheritance and campaign for a radical seat in Parliament. Felix Holt, an artisan and very different radical, returns to stir the new electorate to a sense of worth and destiny. But there is more than a political connection between the two. The ferment of the campaign brings to light long-buried intrigues, which not only affect the fortunes of Harold, but also Esther, the restless and socially ambitious daughter of the preacher, Rufus Lyon. She suddenly finds herself in a position to realize her dreams of refinement with Harold, or with Felix, to choose still another form of radicalism. George Eliot is also famous for incorporating religious themes in her novels. Again, writes about pastoral England and the aristocratic life, upper crust, upper class English gentlemen and ladies. Again, also contrasted with the community of people who do not have money. The rights and no rights of women, the position of women, their love affairs, lots to talk about. I think Sean just reviewed that book and said he was bored as hell and he didn't finish it, but we don't care, we're gonna read it anyway. Everybody has a right to their opinions. Nobody has to love every novel, even if it's a classic, so there's that. My last book is for the month of November. I started to read this when I was reading Middlemarch, but I had to put it aside because it had spoilers in it of other George Eliot novels, and I hadn't read them, so I didn't want to read it yet, but I do now. And this will be my finale to my George Eliot reading project this year, and it is My Life in Middlemarch by Rebecca Mead. And this was published in 2014, and I think this has 293 pages. That's including notes and acknowledgments. But this is, Rebecca Mead basically fell in love with George Eliot. She visits the seminal book of her youth, Middlemarch, and fashions a singular involving story of how a passionate attachment to a great work of literature can shape our lives and help us to read our own histories. Sounds familiar. She was a young woman in an English coastal town when she first read Middlemarch, regarded by many as the greatest English novel. After gaining admission to Oxford and moving to the United States to become a journalist, through several love affairs, then marriage and family, Mead read and reread Middlemarch, the novel which Virginia Woolf famously described as one of the few English novels written for grown-up people, a quote that I have in my YouTube bio, hint, hint, offered Mead something that modern life and literature did not. This has a lot of commentary on all of George Eliot's work. That's why I didn't want to read it and at the time, but I think this would be a great conclusion to this reading project for the year. So that will be for November. That's it. Let me know if you're interested in this. Let me know if you just want to read a few books, a book here, a book there, or any of the biographies. Just write a comment down below. Tell me what you think of the project. I'll be doing this along with Cromwell 2021 and a few other things that I'll have going throughout the year. The last thing I want to do is I want to show you something that I treasure. It's a book that I found in a local used bookstore. I will tell you about that in another video because I have something else planned. This place is special, and I'm going to tell you about that down the road. But I found this modern library copy, and it's a really old one. And it's old enough so that I could not find the date of publication. And I couldn't even find whether it was a first edition or what. But check this out. This is the best known novels of George Eliot. This is a big, giant hardcover, old modern library. It's got black sprayed edges on the top. This includes Adam Bede, Silas Marner, The Mill on the Floss, and Ramallah. Complete in one volume. And I might, here's the print. don't know if you could see that, but I don't know if I would actually read out of this. I might read some of her shorter works, but I mean, and then it's got like the plastic protective cover on it. I can't even find what the publication date of this particular copy is, but I mean, look at the back, look at the back, look how that's, I don't know, 50s, 60s maybe this was printed. But I found this and I'm like kind of made a little scream in the bookstore when I found it on the shelf and grabbed it. And this is just something I'm going to collect and treasure. This is going to be a keeper for the rest of my life, but I absolutely, absolutely just love it. So that's my George Eliot project for 2021. I would love for you to join me if you're interested. Alba and I are on Voxer, and I think we've got a couple other people that are interested so far. I am going to be reading the Jewish Odyssey of George Eliot this month to start. And again, I'll have my schedule in the description box below. Write a comment, let me know what you think. Anything, if you want to have a conversation about anything or any reason I feel the way I do about George Eliot, please let me know. Have a great day. I hope you're reading something good, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.